Well, it's Thursday, and it looks like I'm actually going to be on time with this sports Q&A. Hooray for me! Getting ready for some more preseason football tonight. Bears, I guess. All right, so let's get started with this Q&A, shall we? Twin Strike 3 kicks it off by asking, do you consider Antoine Winfield a very underrated corner? Yeah. Not necessarily a Hall of Fame player, but a really, really good player for a number of years. Solid in coverage and even better in run support. One of the more physical run stuffing corners that I've ever seen. And what was so impressive about that, he was so physical and so stout against the run. And he was all of what, maybe 5'9", 5'10", maybe if you're stretching 185, 190 pounds. Yeah, I always was an Antoine Winfield fan. Very good player, very underrated, I felt, for many years. He also asked, why isn't Steve Sabol in the Hall of Fame? I think it's one of these things where the stupidity of the Hall of Fame voters kicks in. I know I challenged Peter King and a couple of others a few months back on Twitter about why the hell Steve Sabol wasn't in the Hall of Fame. To me, it's ridiculous because when you look at his contributions to the game, they surpass just about anybody. And one of the reasons I was given was that give it time. His dad, Ed, just got in recently. Well, that's not good enough. It took far too many years for Ed to get in. Steve Sabol should have already been in the Hall of Fame, especially while he was alive, to enjoy it. You know, the contributions of NFL films are too numerous for me to name here. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Maybe it's one of those things that with so many worthy players, he kind of gets swept aside. But the fact that he doesn't even make like the semifinals or the finals is completely and totally ludicrous and ridiculous. Mark Lioness Jr. asks, will we ever see a 300-game winning pitcher ever again? I think you will. I think you will. I mean, to sit there and say we never see one again, I think is a really big stretch. A couple of guys that stand out to me, I think, as those that could potentially do that. I look at Mark Buehrle. Some will sit there and say, Mark Buehrle, he's already like 35. But you look at Buehrle, he's got the type of soft-tossing lefty stuff that you could argue he would be able to pitch another 8, 9, 10 seasons, and I don't think that's unrealistic to expect from him. Furthermore, if he does that, averaging 12, 13 wins a season, maybe 14, he'll easily get to 300 wins. So I think he's a very strong candidate. And right now, he would be the guy that I'd be most likely to put my money on winning 300 games before his career is over. You look at Justin Verlander. Here's a guy that's, 30, 31 years of age. I think he's well on his way with hopefully a lot of peak years left in his career. If a guy like CC Sabathia, who has, 208 career wins at age, what is he, 32, 33, something like that. Yeah, he's got some injury problems, and that's a bit of a concern, but he's got a hell of a head start. He's only like 92 wins away. So if he could pitch another 7, 8 seasons somehow, I think he could get there. And a guy, obviously, like a Clayton Kershaw, who already has over 90 wins, and he's only, 26 years of age. Like, you'd look at Kershaw potentially, barring him getting hurt or something. Kershaw would be a guy that in the future that you'd look to win 300 games. So I think there are some guys out there. But right now, if I had to put my money on the guy most likely to do it, it would actually be Mark Buehrle. Piznick64 asks, if Johnny Football and Tim Tebow were in a Super Bowl, who would ESPN root for? Peyton Manning. Maybe Johnny Football, because along with Johnny Football would come his friend LeBron James, so that way they could kiss his ass and suck his dick some more. Unless Tim Tebow got aligned with Peyton Manning somehow, then ESPN would be completely torn. They wouldn't know what to do. Oh, Christ, could you imagine? Tim Tebow versus Johnny Football in the Super Bowl. Oh, hell. ESPN would implode. The mothership would crash. Madden God 45. Which team will finish with a better record in 2014? The Jets, the Cowboys, or the Vikings? The Cowboys will finish with the worst record of the three. Then I'll go between the Jets and the Vikings. I might point to a slight edge to the Vikings. We Are Pro Wrestling asks, of all the years you've played fantasy football, what was the best and worst team you've had? Won several championships, so I don't know if I could point to one team being the best. Maybe my favorite championship team was the year that I got Adrian Peterson in the second round of the draft. obviously, I did very well for myself. Um, that was when he was coming back off of the injury. The fact that I was able to get AP in the middle of round 2, I did something that I almost never, ever, ever considered doing in fantasy football, and that was I took running backs in back-to-back picks in the first 2 rounds. I almost never do that. You'll either see me take wide receiver, running back, or 2 wide receivers, or running back, wide receiver. You'll never see me take 2 running backs. But that year, I took both Chris Johnson and then Adrian Peterson in round number 2 and, won a championship easily because of it. Worst team, season before that in that same league, I had a team that it just seemed like every week I caught a bad break. And what I mean is I came across somebody's monster week. Like out of the 13 games in the regular season, I think 10 of my opponents or 11 of my opponents scored their highest total to date for the season against me. So maybe that's not the worst team, but that was the only team I've had in the last 5-6 years of playing fantasy football that didn't make the playoffs. It was more dumb luck than anything. AGS WWE asked, will Johnny Manziel make an immediate impact in the NFL? Well, I think he will, especially at the box office in terms of merchandise sales. Now you're asking me, will he make an impact in terms of on the football field? Again, I think he can. He's a real wild card. He reminds me a lot from a personality standpoint of a Jim McMahon. And I see a guy like Johnny Manziel being the type of red-ass leader that an organization like the Cleveland Browns desperately needs. And if he makes the Cleveland Browns relevant, then he's obviously had an immediate impact on the NFL. And he also asked, who will have the better MLB career, Giancarlo Stanton, Yasiel Puig, or Mike Trout? Because of the tools, because of the consistency, I'd probably go with Mike Trout at this point. Chris is nice. Asked, will the New York Knicks make the playoffs? Good luck with that one. Let me know how that turns out for you. Baller B. Scott asked, how do you rank your top 5 fantasy tight ends right now? Should have prepared for this one a little bit better. Some of the guys you look at in the top 5, I think obviously Jimmy Graham is clearly the number 1. Clearly. Gronkowski fits somewhere into the top 5. It just depends on how much you want to roll the dice based off of his injury history. Guys like Vernon Davis obviously fit into that category of being elite fantasy football tight end options. Julius Thomas would probably fit into that top 5 as well. Maybe a Jordan Cameron will sneak into there. So that might be 5 of the first tight ends you see drafted in your fantasy football drafts. Alex Shirley, 10. What was the difference between Cade McNown and Rex Grossman as quarterbacks? Well, Grossman had a little more staying power. Here, they were both undersized. McNown was a real scatterbrain, very immature, and lacked the intangibles necessary to be an NFL starting quarterback. Rex Grossman, from a mental standpoint, lacked the ability to stand tall in the pocket and be poised under pressure and be able to go through his progressions consistently. Grossman had the better arm, but they were ultimately both failures. Grossman obviously had more success in the NFL than Cade McNown did, but again, what did that really mean? But those would be some of the differences. I mean, Cade McNown at no point in time ever gave any delusion that he was ever going to pan out, whereas Rex Grossman fooled some people occasionally that he would. At JB1154 asked, if the Royals make the playoffs, is that the biggest thing to happen in KC sports since 1985? Went back to the Brett Saberhagen Quisenberry days of the Kansas City Royals in that legendary 1985 season. Biggest thing since 85? Are you forgetting about the Chiefs? I mean, the Chiefs made the playoffs a lot in the 90s and a few times in the last decade. So I don't see where one playoff appearance by the Royals would circumvent all of those playoff appearances necessarily. Just saying. And at Real Benzillion closes out this Q&A by asking, what are some of the worst max contracts in NBA history? Oh, God. I got to remember what was actually a max contract. Tim Thomas is always one that I'll never forget. God, that was terrible. God, that was awful. Just atrocious. Another one, and not so much because of the player, but because of the circumstances and the situations, you got to say Grant Hill and the Orlando Magic. They thought bringing in him and McGrady was going to make them a big-time power in the Eastern Conference. They thought they were going to sit there and become a dynasty, and it just never happened. Grant Hill couldn't stay healthy, da-da-da. Other max contracts I could think of, a guy like Penny Hardaway. Again, it was because of injuries and this and that. But that was a really bad contract because of his microfracture surgeries. Once he started having the knee problems and he put on weight, he was never the same player. Vin Baker getting a huge amount of money, and he drunk himself out of the damn league. Shawn Kemp, when he got a huge, massive deal and he was in Cleveland, he ate himself and coked himself and fucked himself pretty much out of the league. There's a lot of them. Juwan Howard. I mean, at one point in time, can you believe that teams actually fought over who had the right to sign Juwan Howard to that ridiculous, what was it, $105 million over 7-year contract? We've seen some really bad ones. Another one of the really bad ones because of what it led to, which was a lockout, was the Kevin Garnett deal where he got, 6 years, $126 million. There's been a lot of bad NBA contracts over the years. Some of the worst haven't necessarily been max contracts, but those are some of the biggest money and perhaps max contracts that I can think of that were terrible and some of the worst for a plethora of reasons. So again, thanks to all of you guys that submitted your questions for this Q&A. I do them, hopefully, if I stay focused on it and remember to do them every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So go to Twitter, tweet your questions about sports and fantasy football, whatever, to @PFSpot_Schlegel. I'll see you then. Make sure as well that you check out this channel as I've got my team-by-team preview of the 2014 NFL season underway, so you'll want to check out those videos as well.